The average person now unlocks their phone 96 times a day, once every 10 minutes of waking life. In 2006, that number was 0. So what were our hands doing? What were our brains doing? And why do researchers say we might have actually been better at certain things? In 2007, Apple released the first iPhone. Before that single moment, roughly 6.5 billion people on Earth navigated every single day without a computer in their pocket. No GPS, no camera on demand, no instant access to anyone or anything. And here's what's genuinely shocking. They were completely fine. More than fine, actually. Psychologists who study attention, memory, and social behavior find that pre-smartphone humans developed powerful cognitive habits that most of us have quietly lost without even noticing. This isn't a lecture about how phones are ruining us. It's something stranger and far more fascinating than that simple narrative. So let's start where most of us begin our day. The morning commute. Step onto a subway car in 1998, and the first thing you'd notice is noise. Not music through earbuds, but actual human noise. Conversation, arguments, laughter. People watched each other with unashamed curiosity. Commuters read physical newspapers at staggering rates. In New York alone, subway riders consumed over 1 million papers every weekday morning. Others carried paperback novels, using torn ticket stubs as bookmarks. Some simply stared out windows and let their minds drift. A state neuroscientists now call the default mode network, which is essential for creativity and problem solving. Nobody was glued to a glowing screen. People were genuinely present. But getting anywhere required a completely different mental skill altogether. Before Google Maps, finding somewhere new was a genuine adventure and a genuine risk. You either called ahead for directions, turned left at the Texaco, then third right after the old church, or you consulted a paper map. Road atlases were national bestsellers. The Thomas Guide, a thick brick of indexed street maps, lived in the glove compartments of most American cars. Crucially, people actually memorized routes. Spatial memory, the brain's ability to construct internal maps, was exercised constantly. Neuroscientists studying London cab drivers who memorized the entire city to pass a grueling test called the Knowledge found their hippocampi were physically larger than average. Navigation literally grew your brain. So what happened when there was nothing to navigate and nowhere to be? The word bored meant something completely different before smartphones. There was no escape hatch, no 30-second video to fill a 30-second wait. Sitting in a waiting room, riding an elevator, standing in line, these gaps in stimulation were unavoidable. And here's the counterintuitive finding. Researchers now believe this was genuinely good for us. A study from the University of Central Lancashire found that bored participants consistently scored higher on creative tasks immediately afterward. Boredom is the brain's signal to generate its own entertainment, to daydream, to synthesize, to imagine. Pre-smartphone humans spent thousands of hours per year in this fertile cognitive state. We've nearly eliminated it entirely. We've also eliminated whatever it was quietly producing. What about staying connected with the people you couldn't see? Long-distance phone calls used to cost real money, sometimes several dollars per minute in the 1980s. So families developed rituals. Sunday was calling day. You'd wait for the discounted evening rate, gather a full week's news, and spend 15 careful minutes catching up. Letters were how deeper relationships survived across distance. Handwritten, personal, sometimes taking 2 weeks to arrive. People kept shoeboxes of them, tied with rubber bands, rereading certain ones for years. Photographs were enclosed, developed at the drugstore, precious and finite. Because of all this friction, when you finally saw someone you loved after a long absence, the reunion carried extraordinary emotional weight. There was build-up, there was anticipation. But distance wasn't the only patience test. The smaller daily moments of waiting tell an equally fascinating story. Before smartphones, waiting was an experience people actually prepared for. Dentist appointment. You grabbed a magazine from the rack on the way out. Train delayed. You sighed, looked around, maybe started a conversation with a stranger. Long flight. You packed a paperback, a portable CD player loaded with a carefully considered playlist. Airports had newsstands on every concourse, and they were genuinely busy. Public libraries saw their highest weekday afternoon traffic before mobile phones arrived. Choosing what to bring forced a remarkable kind of intentionality. You had to decide in advance what you actually wanted to think about. That deliberate act of self-knowledge, knowing your own mind well enough to pre-select your entertainment, is one we've nearly abandoned entirely. Before smartphones, making plans was a binding social contract. If you said you'd meet someone at the cinema at 7, you showed up, because there was no way to cancel at 6:55. No running late text, no can we reschedule. If you didn't show, the other person waited, then left, then was simply hurt. The commitment was total. Sociologists studying pre-digital social behavior found that last-minute cancellations were considered genuine moral failures. Plans were made carefully, honored faithfully, and broken only in real emergencies. This gave social engagements a different weight. They meant something because changing them was costly. The low-friction cancel culture of today, where flaking carries almost no social consequence, is entirely new to human civilization. And all of this required extraordinary feats of memory. Ask someone to recite 5 phone numbers from memory right now. Most people can't. 20 years ago, most adults could rattle off 10 to 15 without hesitation. Cognitive psychologist Betsy Sparrow documented what she called the Google effect in 2011. When we know information is stored externally, our brains stop encoding it internally. Before smartphones, people memorized birthdays, addresses, phone numbers, driving routes, song lyrics, and complex schedules. Not because they were smarter, but because they had no alternative. Memory, like a muscle, grew with use. People maintained handwritten address books, personal appointment diaries, and paper calendars. Writing something down by hand, research shows, improves recall significantly over typing. We've outsourced our minds to a device. Now, how did they capture the moments worth remembering? A roll of film held 24 or 36 exposures, your entire budget for a holiday, a wedding, a year of a child's life. Developing the film cost money and took days. This scarcity fundamentally changed how people photographed. Every shot was a deliberate decision. You composed carefully, waited for the right moment, and accepted you might miss it. Because wasting a frame felt genuinely costly, photography was a ritual, not a reflex. The resulting albums became curated treasuries that families pored over for years. Researchers now find that deliberately photographing an event actually reduces how well you experience it, the photo-taking impairment effect. We take more photos than ever. We have fewer real memories. What were people doing on those evenings when they'd drop film off to develop? Without streaming, without social media, without the individual glowing screen pulling each family member into their own separate world, evenings worked differently. Television existed, but it was communal and scheduled, one set, one channel at a time, negotiated as a group. Board games weren't nostalgic novelties. They were just Tuesday. Card games, jigsaw puzzles, reading aloud, long dinner conversations that lasted well past cleared plates. These weren't special activities. They were simply what evenings were. A 1999 Kaiser Family Foundation study found American families averaging significant daily face-to-face time. By the 2020s, that number had dropped dramatically. Television didn't fragment the family. The personalized algorithm, giving every person exactly what they individually wanted, did. Now, What was happening inside people's brains throughout all of this shared life? Here is the neuroscience nobody discusses enough. Smartphone use has measurably altered how the prefrontal cortex manages distraction. Brain imaging studies show that frequent phone checkers experience weaker inhibitory control, the neural capacity to resist acting on impulse. We have also lost what psychologists call deep reading, the ability to follow an extended, complex argument for sustained periods without interruption. And perhaps most striking, a University of Texas study found that just having a smartphone on your desk, face down, completely silent, measurably reduced cognitive performance on difficult tasks. The phone does not need to be in use to affect your thinking. Its presence alone divides your attention. Pre-smartphone brains were not superior. They were simply uncontested. And what those brains could do after work hours reveals something important. Here is something rarely acknowledged. Being unreachable used to be completely normal and socially accepted. If you left the house, you were gone. There was no expectation of responding within minutes. Vacation meant vacation. The office could not reach you at the beach unless someone sent a telegram. Evenings were yours. Weekends were yours. Your employer's claim on your attention ended when you left the building. Occupational psychologists studying recovery from work stress consistently find that genuine psychological detachment, the actual inability to be contacted, is among the strongest predictors of long-term well-being and sustained productivity. The smartphone did not just give us connection. It gave bosses, anxieties, and social obligations permanent access to our most private hours. And most of us consented to this without ever being explicitly asked. Before Twitter, before push notifications, before 24-hour news fully took hold, people received their news in scheduled batches. The morning paper landed on the porch. The evening news ran 30 minutes at 6 o'clock. That was it. Psychologists now recognize this as a measurably healthier information diet. You received the news, processed it, and went about your day. No outrage refresh cycle. No algorithm calibrated to serve whichever headline most spiked your cortisol. A 2022 study found that people who limited news intake to twice daily reported significantly lower anxiety than those who checked continuously. Pre-smartphone people process tragedy on a human timescale. Absorb, reflect, move forward. That is a pace our nervous systems were actually built for. Here is where the story gets genuinely complicated. Here is where fairness matters. Smartphones have given us things we cannot dismiss. Instant emergency communication, navigation assistance for the visually impaired, community for the isolated, medical information that genuinely saves lives, connection with loved ones across the world at zero cost. The pre-smartphone world had real hardships we have conveniently romanticized away. Being genuinely lost was frightening. Missing someone you loved created actual sustained pain. Getting urgent information to someone quickly was often impossible. But the question researchers are now raising is not whether people were happier before phones. The evidence says they were, modestly. The real question is harder. Which specific things did we lose? Could we choose to reclaim them deliberately? And would we want to? That question turns out to be genuinely uncomfortable to sit with. Here is the final surprising fact. The first generation of humans born entirely into a smartphone world is now entering high school. They have never known boredom the way you did. They have never memorized a phone number. They have never been lost without a map app. What did they lose? Tell us in the comments. What do you actually miss? Subscribe if this one made you think differently. We uncover forgotten eras every single week.